We left off last lecture in the middle of a discussion about cultural specificity and emotional expression. So we're going to pick up on that and talk about focal emotions. So these are the type of emotions that are common for a particular culture. It's kind of a particular emphasis that's important in that culture. So societies, for instance, with a culture of honor, such as those in the southern area of the United States, might express more anger at being insulted. So that seems to be a focal emotion that's involved, and we've talked about before how that tends to oftentimes lead to violence, where the source of that violence was someone insulted someone's sense of honor. So this idea of focal emotions relates to number 4 in your study guide, and it also relates to affect evaluation theory. This is the idea that it's also about cultural specificity, where a culture tends to focus on a value that's very important for that culture, and that becomes kind of a prominent influence on emotions. For instance, in more interdependent cultures, the focal emotion, one of the focal emotions, is the emotion of excitement. Americans are very much influenced by the emotion of excitement. It seems to be really important in an individualistic culture such as ours. On the other hand, interdependent or more collectivist cultures, such as Japan, might place a greater emphasis on the emotion of shame, because it's much more important to get along with other people, connect with other people, and maintain positive relationships. Although emotional expression and the way we express it through our facial muscles is largely universal, there are different display rules depending on the culture that you're in, and even sometimes according to what gender you are. So a cultural example is that people from interdependent cultures such as Asia tend to mask their emotions more. So although they express them, they don't express them to the same extent as people from Western cultures. So for instance, one of the examples I always give is that in Japan, if your neighbor's house was on fire and you went to market and you saw your neighbor there while his house was burning down, it would be considered to be rude if you ran up to them excitedly and said, you know, your house is on fire, your house is on fire. So those emotions would more likely be masked, and you would probably tell your neighbor, you probably should go look at your home, or go, you know, go back to your house. So very, very different from what we would experience in our Western culture. So it's really out of respect and consideration for other people and their emotions. And then as far as gender is concerned, in our own more independent culture, we tend to, seems like, specialize in specific emotions depending on our culture in many cases. For instance, men tend more than women to mask emotions like fear and sadness so that they don't come across as feminine, whereas women tend to mask the emotion of anger much more so than men. Probably that's associated with the perception that it's not feminine to be angry. So our emotions, we're going to be talking about emotions and social relationships and how we use them to carry out social interactions. And specifically, your book talks about flirtation, kind of a fun one to concentrate on. So studies have been done in observational studies about how potential partners interact with each other. So men tend to do some shoulder rolls, kind of expansion of the body to kind of emphasize their physique, while women tend to concentrate on smiling, preening, kind of flipping their hair, arching their back, and kind of swinging their hips when they walk. And this article talks about some nonverbal elements of flirting. So sometimes we use what we call emotional expression. So that's just using our facial muscles again, and maybe doing it in an exaggerated manner if we're flirting. Emblems, which are different signs and gestures. Kind of a fun thing that's included here is the emblem, or the sign that we make with our fingers, the A-OK sign. This is the sign that we, tell people everything's A-OK, or just okay in the United States. However, the same sign, you have to be careful where you use it, because it can have different connotations in different cultures. For instance, in Japan it means money. In France it means zero. And in Mediterranean countries and Brazil it means let's have sex. So I'm not going to make that gesture right now. But actually one of the I'm not sure which Bush it was, one of the President Bushes visited Brazil and had a big camera moment when he walked off the plane and he was giving the sign. Well, didn't mean exactly what he intended. So then there are also illustrators, which are just how you use your hands to try to illustrate what you're saying. And regulators, which are kind of body cues. If you turn towards someone, it means you're interested. If you're turning away, you might not want to hear them so much. And then what are called self-adapters, which is about just kind of the nervous fidgeting that we do. You see me going like this all the time. My lectures, try not to do that, but I continue to do that. Okay. So those are some of the elements that go into flirtation and communicating our emotions. So what happens after that? What promotes commitment? So emotions like empathy and concern for the other person and commitment to them can first be an expression of our commitment to them, and then secondly can motivate us to set aside our own self-interest and prioritize the good of a partner. And I hope you had a chance. If you haven't, be sure to watch the video that I posted done by one of our authors on the chemical oxytocin and its relationship to commitment in relationships. It's a good one. Oxytocin is a hormone that's produced in the hypothalamus, and it's released into the brain and the bloodstream. So in non-human species, oxytocin tends to promote commitment and peer bonding. Species that have more of this chemical substance tend to be more monogamous than others. So it's kind of the monogamy hormone. In humans, it's associated with experiences of love. You probably know oxytocin is released in large amounts when mothers give birth. And that's very much involved in the bonding between infant and mother. It promotes commitment in long-term relationships. Now we'll be talking about how we express emotion through touch. And touch is so important, and we know that infants, for instance, in orphanages in Russia where there aren't enough staff to really care for children adequately, that we have identified the failure to thrive as a result of not being touched enough, not having enough interaction that comes through touch. So it seems to be something that we really, it's essential even for our brain development and for getting along socially. The right kind of touch can prompt you to be more collaborative, to be more cooperative. The right kind of touch signals acceptance from the person that's touching, and it encourages you to, it grabs your attention and encourages you to attend to them and then cooperate. We're going to be looking at this study that was done by App, Bouillet, and Jaskolka in 2006. In this study, they had the participants assigned to either the role of the toucher or the touchy. So the toucher and the touchy were separated. They were facing each other, but they were separated by a black curtain that was between them, so they could not see each other. And the toucher was assigned the role of reaching under the curtain and touching the touchy on the forearm. So they were asked to touch them in such a way that they would be expressing these different emotions. So the emotion of compassion, the emotion of gratitude, love, anger, fear, and disgust. So the touchy's role, the person that was being touched, was to identify, they were shown these emotions, and those were written in front of them, and they were to choose which emotion they thought was being communicated. And the green bars represent how the percent of the participants that chose the correct emotion. You can see that they vary across the different emotions from between 50 and over 60% of the participants chose the correct emotion. So that really conveys how important touch is in conveying emotion. Many times more so than just speaking or showing your emotions on your face. This frame focuses on number 5 from your study guide, and it talks specifically about the emotion of anger. So this information comes from observational studies between leaders and those that they're leading, and the dynamics between the expression of anger coming from the leader tends to kind of make the listeners kind of back down in order not to fuel the fire of that emotion. And it's been associated with perceptions of social status, feeling free to express your anger is kind of a sign of social status and more power in a social setting and more power in negotiations. So you have to be careful with this information though, because expressing anger too much can really, since people do back off, it can really shut down communication completely so that one person is dominating a situation. So kind of one of those trickier emotions. So we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence next, and I would say really try not to read these answers down here. Try to look at these cute expressions here. This is actually a little test of emotional intelligence, so I encourage you to look at it without looking at the answers below. I can find a way to cover that up very well, but cover it up for yourself. See how you come out in matching these emotion words to the emoticons. And then you'll count up how many you got right by reading the key, which is at the bottom. So try to resist doing that if you haven't already. And then when we come back, we'll identify them.